to another edition of me talking to you about modernism from my house. Okay, so today, as you know, we're like running a little behind. Everything's crazy. Here's my cat. So today we're going to be talking about all the stuff we didn't get to that was scheduled for the week of March 9th to March 13th, so last week. So today we're going to be talking about Landscape with the Fall of Icarus, Mina Loy's Feminist Manifesto, and HD's Leda and Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken. So let's start with Landscape with the Fall. Well, actually, let's start with the Frost, because that was in the beginning. All right, so that's going to be on page 744, so you can turn to that in your anthology, or Google the poem, whatever you're doing. All right, so we're not going to talk a ton about Frost, honestly. It's a rabbit hole that, probably I should go down teaching you American Lit, but I'm not gonna, so sorry. But I did want to talk about this poem in particular because it's something that I think is like very often taught, but very often misinterpreted. So I'll read it for you guys. The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler. Long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere, ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. All right, so this poem is in iambic pentameter, A, B, A, B, A, and it has like an alternating A-B rhyme scheme, or A-B in the first stanza, C-D in the second stanza. So it's a very formally like perfect poem, and this is something that Frost was really well known for. If you look at the poem Birches, which is right under it, that's like in perfect iambic pentameter the whole time, which is unrhymed. That's called blank verse. So something that we're not going to see in a lot of the other modernist poems that I've chosen for us to look at. Most of the other ones are in free verse, or they'll have some kind of like rhyme scheme, but it won't really be super strict. Frost is very strict. He really was following rules in his poetry. And so I guess I just kind of wanted to think about what this poem means and why it's got all this like cultural cachet as a poem about how you should choose the road less traveled by. So if you look at the last stanza, he says, I shall be telling this with a sigh. And I think someone mentioned in one of my class discussion forums that the sigh is really our clue that he is saying this with a bit of irony, right? He says, I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So that's ironic, right? Like he's saying that, but doesn't totally mean what he's saying, because maybe it made all the difference, but like he can't really know that. There's no way of knowing what was down the other road, because as he says, knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. So it's not really a poem about taking the road less traveled by so that your whole life is different. It's really a poem about taking the road less traveled by if you feel like it, but ultimately it's kind of a poem about how our choices don't matter too much, right? His life probably would have been different if he took the other path, but like he can't know that, right? Like we all have things that we chose not to do with our lives, and we don't know how our lives would have played out if we'd made the other choice. We just have to kind of keep going, right? Like knowing how way leads on to way, we can't go back. So that's really all I wanted to kind of get out with that poem. Okay, so let's move on. This is annoying. Sorry, flower pot TV here. Okay. All right. So let's talk about what's next. Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. So this is on 790. 795, and this is the second volume of the anthology. I'm sure you're all aware. Okay, so this is an ekphrastic poem. You want to know that term. So an ekphrastic poem is a poem that is in conversation with a piece of art. So it's like responding to art. So if you go on Moodle, I've posted a link to a picture of the painting that Williams is talking about here, and that this poem is in conversation with. And you have your footnotes here too, right? So a landscape by Flemish painter Peter Bruegel the Elder, in which Icarus is depicted by a tiny leg sticking out of the sea in one corner of the picture. And then we know Icarus from our footnote is, in Greek mythology, a young man whose father made wings for him with the feathers held together by wax. Icarus flew too close to the sun, the wax melted, and he fell into the sea and drowned. So Icarus' father was Daedalus, and he was trying to help them escape the island of Crete, where Daedalus had also built the maze for the Minotaur, but that's like a whole other story. And this story is one of those Greek myths that gets told over and over again because it's like, I mean, it's really like part of our like collection of idioms in English, I guess. Like we are likely to say that someone flew too close to the sun, right? Like they, like when somebody gets kind of like too high and mighty for their own good, right? Like they, you know, you need to quit while you're ahead, I guess would be the opposite of flying too close to the sun. So Icarus literally flew too close to the sun with his wings, which were made of wax, and the wax melted and he fell and died. So this is our poem. Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. Sorry about the sun also, it's sunny. According to Bruegel, when Icarus fell, it was spring. A farmer was plowing his field. The whole pageantry of the year was awake, tingling, near. The edge of the sea, concerned with itself, sweating in the sun that melted the wing's wax. Unsignificantly, off the coast, there was a splash, quite unnoticed. This was Icarus drowning. So, I think his choice to portray the landscape and not the fall of Icarus is really interesting here, and it kind of tells us something about like the nature of tragedy, right? So, and honestly even makes me think of like what's going on in the world today, right? Like we are in the midst of something that no one who's alive right now has ever had to experience, right? This like really dangerous, scary time for everyone, and yet spring is still happening around us, right? Like you can still go for a walk outside and see all these flowers blooming, and like the, you know, the turn of the year away from winter, and it feels like there's all this kind of beauty and hope and sunshine, but then on the other hand, like we know what's going on with this pandemic and this sort of like human tragedy, right? So this is not about a tragedy that affects everyone, you know, all of humanity, right? This is about a personal tragedy. And when you look at the painting, Icarus is depicted as literally just like a pair of legs in the ocean. So it's this real like change of perspective around the story that shows the way life goes on, no matter what, sometimes, right? Like, the farmer is still plowing his field, the year is awake, right? Like spring is coming. The sea is sweating in the sun. So even the sea, right? The ocean is personified as concerned with itself. So I think there's something being said here about the way that like every entity or being is only like concerned with their own, like what's going on with themselves, right? Like we're selfish. And so then unsignificantly, right? Like it doesn't even, it's prefaced with this word that says it doesn't matter. Off the coast, there was a splash quite unnoticed, so no one around knows what's happening, and this was Icarus drowning. So I think he's really showing how personal tragedy, I guess, only changes the world for the person who experiences it. I think on one level it's kind of a grim poem because of that, right? Like Icarus doesn't, no one even notices as he drowns. But on the other hand, there's maybe a sense of hope, right? That like this world that doesn't have to do with like ourselves kind of keeps going on around us. And keep in mind too that like this is something I talked about in the last lecture, but like a big thing for modernism or for modernists was to make it new, and what they meant by it was not just language, but also myth and like everything that came before and all the old stories and the classics and the canon. So in this case, we have William Carlos Williams taking this like very, very old story from Greek myth, like thousands of years ago, and also taking this old painting from like the 1500s and making both of those new by writing about them in a new way, and particularly by writing about the myth of Icarus in a way that like we don't normally think about it. Okay, so I mean, any questions about that? You can list them in the discussion. Okay, so let's turn now to Leda by HD. That is on page. So we're saving the Mina Loy for last because it's crazy. So that is on 820 something, 821. All right. So when a poem has its title, like the title is a person's name, that pretty much always means that that's the speaker of the poem. So when we read this poem, we can assume that it is Leda herself who is talking, and we have our footnote to tell us who Leda is, if you don't already know. Leda is the mortal wreathed by Zeus in the guise of a swan. Helen of Troy was her daughter. I probably should have done these lectures in a different order and started with mom and not the daughter, but that's not what I did. So yeah, in the story, like there's a giant swan comes and rapes Leda, and this is something that Zeus does over and over. Like he's always disguising himself as an animal and then raping women. He did it for Europa by disguising himself as a bull. Pretty sure that was, yeah. So just a, I don't know, weird thing Zeus did all the time. And there's a lot of art about this too. So if you want, like you can look at just different art of this, like that's made depicting this scene from myth. And again, modernism, taking very old Greek mythology, making it new. So make the old stories new. Okay, Leda. Where the slow river meets the tide, a red swan lifts red wings and darker beak, and underneath the purple down of his soft breast uncurls his coral feet. Through the deep purple of the dying heat of sun and mist, the level ray of sunbeam has caressed the lily with dark breast, and flecked with richer gold its golden crest. Where the slow lifting of the tide floats into the river and slowly drifts among the reeds and lifts the yellow flags, he floats where tide and river meet, Ah, kingly kiss, no more regret, nor old deep memories to mar the bliss, where the low sedge is thick, the gold daylily outspreads and rests beneath soft fluttering of red swan wings, and the warm quivering of the red swan's breast. Okay, so I love this poem, and I feel like there's a lot to talk about with it, so we'll see how long this takes. Okay, so this poem is in conversation with like the myth, but it's also in conversation with a poem by W.B. Yeats that I've linked on Moodle, but I'll read to you as well. So this is written in, oh, it's another year, probably like, why wouldn't I put the year here? You know, I just, hang on. Okay, this is written in, oh, huh, okay. Actually, this was apparently written after the HD poem, which is kind of surprising, or like concurrently. So, okay, ignore what I said. Alright. However, I am still going to read it to you because I love this poem too. So, another way that Leda has been depicted in art is here. Leda and the Swan. A sudden blow, the great wings beating still above the staggering girl, her thighs caressed by the dark webs, her nape caught in its bill. He holds her helpless breast upon his breast. How can those terrified, vague fingers push the feathered glory from her loosening thighs? And how can body, laid in that white rush, but feel the strange heart beating where it lies? A shudder in the loins engenders there the broken wall, the burning roof and tower, and Agamemnon dead. Being so caught up, so mastered by the brute blood of the air, did she put on his knowledge with his power before the indifferent beak could let her drop? Okay, so Yeats's vision of Leda and the Swan is a lot more violent, and that's, I mean, I feel like that's kind of like a common depiction of it, right? Like, it's, you know, it's considered a rape. It's not considered like a consensual encounter between Leda and the Swan. So HD's depiction of this, I think, is really interesting because it's both very peaceful and very erotic. And it doesn't allude to like what's going to happen when Helen is born. So although where Yeats says a shudder in the loins engenders there the broken wall, the burning roof and tower, and Agamemnon dead. So that's like when Zeus impregnates Leda with Helen, it's the foreshadowing of the Trojan War. But you don't really see that in HD's Leda. So much like Landscape with the Fall of Icarus, this poem begins with like description of the landscape, right? And the landscape is really present throughout the poem. So where the slow river meets the tide, a red swan lifts red wings and darker beak. And the description of the swan is weird too, right? So like I want you to picture this swan. I've never seen a swan that was red and purple with coral feet. So it's sort of like a magical, beautiful swan. It's much more like, I don't know, like she's using kind of like weird imagery to give us this swan, and it seems like she's sort of purposely pushing against the idea of like whiteness as symbolic of purity or beauty here. So this is a red swan. And then in the second stanza, you'll see that she starts personifying the whole landscape. So through the deep purple of the dying heat of sun and mist, the level ray of sunbeam has caressed the lily with dark breast and flecked with richer gold its golden crest. So really good rhyme there too, right? Like this poem doesn't have a formal rhyme scheme, but she's still making use of like rhyme all over the place, in a way that actually reminds me a little bit of Emily Dickinson, right? Like it's, you can feel the rhythm, you can feel the rhyme, but like it's a little off, you know, it's not formally perfect at all. So in that stanza, the sunbeam is personified as being able to caress a lily, and the lily is then personified as having a dark breast. So there's this kind of like physical, like the natural world is portrayed in a way that's analogous to like human physicality. So it's very erotic, right? Like the sun is like caressing the lily's breast. So she's giving us this scene that surrounds the rape of Leda, much like William Carlos Williams gave us the scene that surrounded the fall of Icarus. And then again, where the slow lifting of the tide floats into the river and slowly drifts among the reeds and lifts the yellow flags, he floats where tide and river meet. So setting, really important here, right? We're like very focused on the natural world, on natural imagery, on this kind of beautiful like marsh type situation, or like maybe an estuary. We have like a tide and then a river, and then we have the swan. He floats where tide and river meet. So up until this point in the poem, I'm on line 20, up to line 23. We don't have that much about the swan, right? Like we have description of him in the first stanza, and then we have this digression where she talks about nature, and then we have he floats where tide and river meet. And then in our final stanza, we sort of see Leda and the swan coming together, right? So, kingly kiss. And his kiss is kingly because he is the king of Olympus, Zeus disguised as swan. No more regret nor old deep memories to mar the bliss. So there's really like, this is like a good encounter for Leda here. The way HD depicts this is really like erotic and beautiful. And then we have more description of the natural world, right? We see the natural world and the swan actually coming together. So where the low sedge is thick, the gold daylily outspreads and rests. So again, like this personification and physical like description of a daylily that can outspread and rest beneath soft fluttering of red swan wings and the warm quivering of the red swan's breast. I think it's kind of interesting too how like the final depiction we get of Zeus as swan is somewhat feminine. It's the warm quivering of the red swan's breast. Like it feels almost like maternal or something, right? I don't know if I have like a reason for that for you guys, but I do think it's something interesting to note. Okay, so any questions? Cool, put them in the discussion. We can't, talk about it in person. So just put your questions in the discussion, and we will end with Mina Loy. All right, so this is on 8:06. Okay, we're looking at 24 minutes. All right, you know what? I'm gonna make a separate video for this.